it's Kyle, and we're back for another Chem of the Week. And this week being FFA week, I did pull out my blue jackets, threw it up on here just for old time's sake. I do pull it out like once a year pretty much for this week, but you know, it's kind of important to remember a lot of us have FFA roots, and FFA meant a lot to me when I was a kid. You know, right in my office here, I've got my Star Green Hands and got a couple other plaques sitting on the wall. Just something it's really, really big for me. And, you know, I've always shown my support for FFA, especially with kids doing plots. I've always taken a lot of time out of my schedule to try to help FFA kids out whenever possible. So back to our subject, the Chem of the Week this week, and it's one that's been in the news a lot, is going to be Metolachlor. And Metolachlor comes in a bunch of different names, but for the most part, we're going to talk about dual, basically. So as Metolachlor, there is a population of weeds in basically the Bloomington area, McLean County, Illinois, that has shown tolerance and basically resistance to Metolachlor. So we have a population of amarantha / water hemp that shows resistance to dual, and that's a big problem for a lot of people because dual is a huge pre we've been adding quite a bit in soybeans. I mean, a lot of the new premixes that have been coming out the last few years are coming out with dual included, so there is a authority product with dual in it. There's a lot of dual that goes down, so it's a big problem. Now, is it an immediate concern for me sitting in my house in the southeast part of Wisconsin? Not really yet. It does scare me a little bit. We still don't have, for the most part, PPO resistant water hemp. We do have some Roundup resistant water hemp in the area, but we're still basically on the cusp. So I get a little worried, but I'm not overly worried. I did write a newsletter article last week about HPPDs and the fact that we're using a lot of HPPDs. So, you know, we've talked about that on this too. Get a little concerned. It's not an immediate concern, but it's something we need to keep an eye on. So we'll get into actually what Metolachlor is. So S-Metolachlor is the preferred version. So S-Metolachlor isolated the S isomer of the Metolachlor family. So the S isomer is a little bit more effective. You know, they're both going to work, but the S isomer is a little bit better than just the regular Metolachlor. So when you look at a label, you see S-Metolachlor on it, you're going to have a little lower use rates. It's going to work a little better, but at similar use rates where you actually have the same amount of active, and you can compare the both, it's going to work just about the same. So we use a lot of S-Metolachlor. We start looking at some safety things. The original duals, we do a lot of pre-merge with them. They're still really great to throw in a program. For me, on soybeans, I like to see dual pre. I think there's some labeled out there that'll go up to like V4. That, I think V3, V4 is kind of the limit. Once we get into that, we're looking at acetochlor, which acetochlor is not too different than Metolachlor. So acetochlor is going to gain you a little bit better. I think it's a little better on woolly cup. I know it's a little better on fall panicum. It's going to need quite a bit less rainfall activation than dual. Dual seems to stick around maybe a little bit longer than what acetochlor would. So it's kind of a him and a haw. It really doesn't matter one or the other. It's kind of like dimethylamide, which is Outlook. They all work really well. They're really decent on small seededs and grass. You just got to be careful on rainfall activation. So dual is a great product. I wouldn't be afraid of using dual in Wisconsin. If you're in central Illinois, it might be something you are going to have to reconsider. The issue we're getting into, and it's the same thing with HPPDs, is we're looking at the potential of using them in both crops. And dual we do use in both crops right now. HPPDs, it's kind of the MGI beans got approved. There's no approved herbicides for that yet, so we can't use Metolachlor or mesotrione in beans, but it's getting there. So we're potentially using, well, basically we're using dual in every crop. So that is a concern. You know, we're using Roundup in every crop, and now we're going to be using dual in every crop. So the biggest thing is going to be to mix it up. Dual is a great herbicide in corn. When you start looking at Metolachlor in corn, we have such a wide window there. I mean, you can go up to 30-inch tall corn with Halex GT, and we're in that mesotrione. I mean, it works great, but at the same time, we need to be a little bit careful on what we're using. So in soybeans, we have plenty of other options. I mean, there's Outlook that still works just fine. There's Acetochlor and Warrant that works just fine post-emerge. We got the Treflans. I mean, there's Prowl, Treflan. There's a lot of stuff out there we can still use. So do we need to use dual in soybeans? No. Am I really worried about dual resistance? Not yet. It does kind of scare me a little bit when we look to the future. There's not a lot out there yet that's coming in the pipe. So we're kind of limited on grass and small seededs right now. So yeah, I'm concerned, but I'm not. So back to dual. Dual's been a great herbicide. The thing that we've got into issues with, especially when we have a dry spring, dual doesn't quite keep it'll reactivate fairly well. But, if that herbicide is not activated and working perfectly, you're going to have flushes. And you're going to see that with any herbicide you've got. My preference has always been kind of Acetochlor, but I mean, it's the same thing with dual. So I'm using, right now, the last few years, I've been using Resicor and then coming back with Warrant in soybeans. So I'm guilty of using the same thing. So this year, we're actually mixing that up and we're going out with Fierce Pre-Emerge. It's basically Valor and Pyroxysulfone, Zidua, a pre in our soybeans, and then coming back with maybe Flexstar Roundup. So trying to mix that up. Our corn program, we're still going with Resicor. You got 3 or 4 different options going pre-emerge in corn right now. I'm going to try some Corvus. Corvus has been a really good product south of us. We just got the label 2 years ago. So we're going to try 100 acres of that. We'll see what that does. But there's options out there. Dual's a great herbicide. Metolachlor is really good. Just make sure you read the label, understand some of the premixes, what you're putting out there. You can go post in soybeans, but just be very, very careful and understand which one you're using. Understand there's differences in dual. So you could buy generic dual and it'll be very, very cheap, but it might not have a post label in soybeans. It might not even have a label in soybeans. Just be really, really careful with dual. There's different safeners. We have dual Magnum and dual 2 Mag. So there's a bunch of different chemicals out there, and dual's been a great product, especially for these pumpkin guys. I used to run a program with dual and strategy. Sometimes we'll run dual and Sendia pre, and they've worked really, really well. So Sendia is a version of Permit that's labeled for pumpkins, if you guys ever hear that stuff. And Strategy is a herbicide combo of Command and Curbit. So it's basically Command, and it's really yellow, so it looks like Prowl or Treflan. So there's a lot of stuff that uses dual. I mean, I can name several crops offhand. So be careful in what you're paying for. Understand what the label is. Not all Metolachlors are kind of created equal. But at the same time, if you're going out with a non-S isomer of Metolachlor and you're going pre in soybeans, it's labeled. It's got safener. It works really well. If it's labeled, just go out there and use it. If you get a pretty decent price on it, understand the difference between branded dual with S Metolachlor and non. It's just, I can go on and on about dual, but it's still a good product. I just would be leery and potentially looking for other options in soybeans, or in corn. If you're doing another option, you can still use it in soybeans. Just be mindful of it. Use labeled rates. Make sure you can mix it with what you're using. But in a soybean program, I want to have really 2 things. I want to have residual for small seededs and large seededs, and I want to look at length of residuals. So dual kind of fits in probably basically 2 of those. I'll say the large seededs. It's still a good product. So this weed of the week, or chemical, almost hefty again. This chemical of the week has been Metolachlor. Again, it's still a really good chemical. Don't be afraid to use it. But do pay attention to what's going on down south of us. This could be a rather large thing to come towards us in the future. So stay tuned. We'll get some more updates as we go along with the winter.